But 2,500 years ago, humankind experienced a profound transformation.
Suddenly, there were new possibilities.
This is a time when rationality overrode superstition and belief.
This is an ethic which does not rely on the gods.
The world is now explained in terms of natural forces.
We're now responsible for our own destiny.
Upheavals across the globe sparked an ambitious vision of what humans could achieve, spearheaded by three trailblazers.
Socrates, Confucius, and the Buddha. Great thinkers from the ancient world whose ideas still shape our own lives.
Is wealth a good thing?
How do you create a just society?
How do I live a good life?
By daring to think the unthinkable, they laid the foundations of our modern world.
I've always been intrigued by the fact that these men, who lived many thousands of miles apart, seemed almost spontaneously, within 100 years of one another, to come up with such radical ways of thinking.
So what was going on? I want to investigate their revolutionary ideas, to understand what set them in motion.
In this programme, I'm on the trail of that quintessential Eastern sage, Confucius.
He had a mission, but many people at that time did not agree with him.
His vision was modelled on the power of the past and the family. He believed that education could transform both individuals and society.
He's talking about your state of mind, your feelings.
But in the 20th century, Confucius was declared an enemy of communism.
So now he should be out of favour. But that hardly seems to be the case.
This is the longest continuous civilization in the world, and Confucius has a huge role in that.
It's so amazing to be so close to them. My heart is beating.
In 551 BC, an elderly ex-soldier from the ancient state of Lu faced a grave predicament. His family line was in danger of ending. He needed a son to continue his name, someone who'd be able to perform the vital rituals to honour him and his ancestors.
The old man took a young wife. We're told that she went to a sacred mountain and prayed hard for a boy.
The son she bore would become known as Master Kong. In Chinese, Confucius. In the West, we call him Confucius.
Confucius was born into one of the most advanced civilizations in the world. The ancient Chinese were innovators in art, metalwork, agriculture, and weaponry. And from around 1000 BC, they developed a sophisticated political system, a network of vassal lords who bore allegiance to one king. But by the time Confucius was growing up, stability had turned to chaos.
This was an age when all of ancient China was trapped in a ruthless cycle of war.
Tribal invasions from the west, along with rebellion amongst the lords, splintered the empire into independent states, all vying for power.
Spurred on by a kind of arms race, now that cast iron meant that weapons could be mass-produced, families attacked families. This was total war.
This collapse in society would become the catalyst for Confucius's groundbreaking philosophy. The oldest record of Confucius' life and ideas, the Analects, were compiled about a century after his death. These fragments of his conversations, along with other later histories, give us clues to his life story. We're told that Confucius was just 3 when his father died. Old aristocracy, he'd fallen on hard times, one of the victims of the turmoil of the age, leaving Confucius's mother to raise her son on her own in a kind of genteel poverty. Interestingly, it seems that education was Confucius's lifeline. Somehow, probably through a mix of private teachers and homeschooling, and you suspect the sheer grit and determination of his mother, Confucius was taught history, poetry, and ritual. While other children played with toys, he's said to have acted out sacred rituals by laying out cups and bowls. Now, these weren't just empty gestures, a bit of spiritual theatre. The kinds of rituals that Confucius learned played a crucial role in the ancient Chinese worldview. A worldview in which order and harmony, both on Earth and in the cosmos, were considered essential goals if life on Earth was to continue. The ancient rites that young Confucius knew were performed here at the Temple of Heaven in Beijing, right up until the 20th century. The Chinese had a particular religious outlook, which meant that these rituals weren't directed towards a deity.
There is no creator God. There's nothing like the idea of a supreme power that dreams everything into being. What it posits instead is this notion that there are 2 cosmic forces. They're not even really divine, they're just natural forces, a bit like gravity in a sense. And on the temple here, you have perhaps the most common, the most powerful symbols of these 2 great forces, and that is the dragon, the heavenly force, and the phoenix is the female, the coal, the earthly force. And they are locked in perpetual struggle. They try to overcome each other, and it's this incredible dance of power out of which all life pours.
So what's humanity's role in all of this?
We're fundamental to this. You've got these 2 great cosmic forces, and our role is to keep the balance, and we do this through ritual. And that's what this kind of temple complex was built for. This is where the ruler would come to make offerings to rebalance these 2 forces. And it wasn't just for the rulers. It took place in every single temple, every local shrine, right down to the household.
Sounds like a potent and a pervasive worldview that Confucius is being brought up with.
Absolutely, it's the only worldview he knows.
As he reached adulthood, it looks as though Confucius grew to appreciate the gaping disparity between the ancient ideal of order and the reality of life subject to the chaos that raged all around him. His search for a solution to that intractable problem at the very heart of Chinese society would prove to be his life's work.
Fortunately, conditions across the ancient world were nourishing new ways of thinking. Improvements in agriculture, increased trade and growing urbanisation meant that some in society were less tied to a life of subsistence, creating the opportunity for men like Socrates, the Buddha and Confucius to develop their ideas. The scale of change, economic and technological, is reflected in archaeological remains, like this monumental grain store.
Advances in technology from the Iron Age onwards led to an increase in agricultural yields that were stored in massive pits like this. Suddenly, for ordinary people, because they had enough food, life just wasn't a grinding cycle of a kind of hand-to-mouth existence. Obviously, stores like this provided grain, but they also gave another great gift: time to think.
When Confucius was about 20, we're told he landed a bureaucratic job, managing grain stores like this. But his mind was occupied by the turmoil of the day.
Looking around him, it seemed obvious to Confucius that humanity needed help, and how he responded is considered a first in Chinese history. He began to engage in systematic philosophical inquiry. One thing I like about Confucius is the sense that you get that he had a kind of natural curiosity that he felt compelled to explore and to try to understand the world. And in his early 20s, he decided to leave his home state of Lu and get on the road.
Travelling west, he would have eventually met the Great Yellow River.
I think we have to imagine him at this point in his life as a kind of ethnographer, going from one place to another with open eyes and an open mind, gathering together experiences and encounters.
The Analects describe Confucius meeting people who'd renounced civilised society and lived amongst nature. These recluses were the forerunners of Taoism, that other great belief system of ancient China. They believed in something known as the Way.
Could you explain to me what exactly the Way is?
道它化身万物，它是宇宙的本源，也是万事万物运行的一种准则，也是我们向道人所遵循的最高的准则。
Is it possible for humans to influence or control the Way?
人是不可以去影响道的，人道只能去顺应、效法、遵循这个道。
谢谢，谢谢。
The Taoists believed that developed society diverted us from the Way. Society was artificial, something people imposed on the natural, spontaneous way of the universe. Only by reconnecting with the forces of nature could we achieve harmony once again.
Confucius reacted to Taoist belief with a kind of frustrated indignation. We can't go and live with the birds and the beasts. Am I not a man among men? If the Way prevailed in the world, there'd be no need for me to change it.
Confucius's search for solutions to the problems of his day took on a more practical, political dimension. For him, the Way wasn't an intangible cosmic force. Instead, he saw it as the harmony that could be brought about by a perfectly ordered society, something attainable by human action. It was a claim the Taoists thought the height of arrogance. This critical dispute is embodied in one legendary encounter. Confucius is said to have come here, the city of Luoyang. As he was studying in the state archives, he met an older man, and they struck up a philosophical discussion.
As Confucius got up to leave, the old man chastised him. Put away your proud air and many desires, your insinuating habit and wild will. These are of no advantage to you.
The enigmatic old man was none other than Lao Tse, credited as the founder of Taoism. Whether it's true or not, this pairing with such a great figure reveals the iconic status Confucius would later reach. And it tells us something else.
That setting in the archive gives us a clue to Confucius's methods. For him, solutions to contemporary problems lay in a close study of what had gone before. The past was a kind of reservoir of truth.
Ever since he was a boy, he'd been schooled in ancient texts. Now, as a man, they became the inspiration for and the very foundation of his philosophy. Recent discoveries have shed new light on these classic texts of Chinese history. 800 bamboo slips, which contain the earliest evidence of Confucius's words.
They were found in 1993 in a tomb of an old nobleman.
Amazing.
Yes.
And they date back to when?
Oh, these were dated to the 4th century BCE, roughly 100 years after Confucius. And it says something like, set your mind on the way and be virtuous. Do everything in accordance with humanity.
Not only the earliest words of Confucius, but beautiful words too. Wow.
And they were so amazing because they provide us new information on early classics that were very important to Confucius himself. And for example, this particular slip mentioned about the classics he would have read. The Book of Odes, Ritual, and Music. The Book of History is very important because it recorded figures such as the Duke of Zhou and early kings of the Western Zhou that was about 500 years before Confucius' time. And these men were able to lead a society of harmony.
Confucius found in the words of the Book of History what he was looking for. An ideal model where social and political harmony had prevailed, engineered by the almost superhumanly sage rulers of the early Zhou dynasty. In particular, the Duke of Zhou.
When his brother, King Wu, died, the Duke could have seized the throne. But it's reported that instead he acted loyally, ruling as a regent for his nephew, the king's son. And then, when the boy grew up, fairly and faithfully, he handed over the reins of power.